Hello, my cookies, and welcome. Welcome to Russell Cooks. Thanks so much for tuning in. Today, I'm making a traditional butternut squash soup. I'm also going to be making some cornbread and using some of that cornbread to make some pumpkin spice croutons that we're going to add to this butternut squash soup. It's going to elevate it a bit. So now that we know what we're doing, let's gather our ingredients. We're going to start with our cornbread. Now, I have some frozen corn kernels, 3/4 of a cup to 1 cup, plenty. I got some cornmeal, baking soda, baking powder, pumpkin spice, buttermilk, some brown sugar, light or dark is fine, a couple of eggs, salt, 1.5 cups of flour, and last but not least, I've got some melted butter. We're going to be using a lot of butter throughout this recipe, so I just melted a whole bunch. I'm not going to put all this into the cornbread. I'm going to use some for the butternut squash soup and then for the pumpkin spice croutons. So now that we know what we're doing with the cornbread, let's gather our ingredients for the butternut squash soup. For the soup, you are going to need butternut squash. I have about 3 pounds here. I have an onion. Leeks work fantastic here. You can also use some shallot. Heavy cream, butter, vegetable broth, and salt. It's a pretty simple, streamlined soup. We're just going to bring out the best flavor of this butternut squash as best we can. I'm going to be roasting the squash in the skin, just kind of developing that flavor, evaporating that wateriness. And then we're also going to scoop out the seeds and some of that inside part that you're not going to use. We're going to fry that up in a little bit of butter, and we're really going to reinforce our vegetable broth here. You can use water here. I like the backbone that veg broth brings, but make sure you choose one that is not overly sweet. We're going to be developing some savory flavors by roasting this butternut squash, sauteing this onion. We're going to get some savoriness in the butter and from the heavy whipping cream. So now that we know what we're doing and we've gathered our ingredients, let's get started. We're going to first focus on the cornbread. I've preheated my toaster oven to 400 degrees. I have the middle rack. Halfway through cooking, I might lower that rack down because as it rises, I don't want the top to over brown, so I'll probably switch it to a lower rack. For my butternut squash, I have my other oven going at 450. We are going to roast it and essentially scoop it out and blend it up into the soup base that we're going to make on the stove. First things first, cornbread, soup base, finish the soup, croutons, and we're done. All right, so for our cornbread, we are doing 1.5 cups AP flour. Next up, we are doing a cup of cornmeal. All right, I have Goya cornmeal here, whatever cornmeal you want. I like the fine stuff. So this is 1 cup fine cornmeal. Next up, we are doing baking powder, not soda yet. Powder, 2 teaspoons baking powder. This will give us some lift and also help a little bit with the browning. Baking soda, we're doing 1/4 teaspoon. Again, it's going to help with a little bit of lift and a little bit of browning. A lot more potent baking powder. Finally, salt. You're going to want about 3/4 of a teaspoon of table salt. If you're using kosher like I am, do a little bit more. Do a little bit more than a whole teaspoon. So I got a little bit more than a whole teaspoon. There we go. Let's go ahead and whisk our dry ingredients together, and then we're going to turn to our wet ingredients. All right. Now it is time for our wet ingredients. All right, for our quote unquote wet ingredients, I'm doing some frozen corn. Just going to add that in. It's about 3/4 to 1 cup of frozen corn. I'm also going to add some brown sugar. Yes, brown sugar. Everyone is like, is it wet? Is it dry? It is both. So I'm going to do about 1/4 cup here, packed dark brown sugar. I'm going to be doing 2 eggs. And last but not least, I'm going to add 1 cup of my buttermilk here. All right. Going to go ahead and blend this. It's still going to be a little chunky because of the corn, but you pretty much want to puree it. Food processor or blender, it's going to be anywhere between 15 and 30 seconds. All right, it's nicely pureed. Again, it's not going to be super smooth because of the corn, but that's fine. All right, last but not least, we are going to add 1/2 cup of butter, and I'm just going to incorporate it here. Easy peasy. Don't have to puree it for too long. Just want to get that butter mixed in. All right, let's go ahead and add our wet ingredients to our dry. And let's go ahead and just fold it together into a nice batter. Pretty much the same consistency as brownie batter. Don't overmix. At the same time, don't stress too much about overmixing. Make sure it's nicely mixed. No dry streaks, no dry clumps. All right, now let's get it in our 8x8 baking dish. Spray it down. All right, we're doing this first because it's got to cook and cool, and then we're going to cut some of it up and make some croutons out of it. Just going to smooth out the top. Pretty much however your top looks going in, it should look similar coming out. So if you got spikes and whatever, it might come out with little spikes and such. So smooth it out so it comes out pretty smooth here. Make sure you get it into the corners. All right. Putting it in my 400-degree toaster oven. I'm gonna be cooking it for about 25 to 30 minutes. I'm gonna lower it to the lower rack halfway through. I don't want the top to get too brown. All right, here we go. It is time for the butternut squash soup. This is going to be as easy as I can make it. Lots of hands-off time. Trim off the top, trim off the bottom, slice it down the middle. 2 hands, not a race, slow and steady. Don't cut yourself. I like wearing gloves because it kind of oozes out some sticky stuff that gets on your hand. I don't like that. What I'm going to do is essentially just crosshatch pattern. So hopefully we enhance the browning here. And I'm going to scoop out the insides. I'm going to put this into a pot. I'm going to add a little bit of butter and my veg stock, and we're going to enhance that veg stock with more butternut squash flavor. I'm just going to use the insides here. So I got 2 here. 1 big butternut squash is fine. You want 3 to 4 pounds of butternut squash here. Not really much more. These were on the smaller side, so I did 2. Get in there. Oh my God. Look at the little baby amount of seeds. So the purpose of this is we're going to roast it up, take it out, turn it into the soup. So before I start doing this on the stove, because it doesn't take as long as roasting, I'm going to get these in the oven to roast. Now, because I am doing 2 and they're different sizes, I am going to use 2 different trays. If you're using one baking tray is fine. But I'm just going to crosshatch pattern, hopefully to promote some good browning. Don't cut yourself. I do this for stuff that I do on the grill as well. No Michelin stars today. All right. I'm also going to put them face down. I want to rub them down with a little bit of butter, so I'm just going to put a little bit, half a teaspoon on each. A little bit of salt on each, maybe a 1/4 teaspoon, maybe half a teaspoon on each one. Let's go ahead and rub it down, flip it over. Now I'm going to put this on the lower mid rack in my oven because I want that browning on the butternut squash. 450-degree oven, lower mid rack. Let's do it. So that's going to take anywhere between 30 and 60 minutes. So I've got it going. It's hands-off time though. Let's build the soup base. All right, let's head over to the stove here. I'm going to add about 2 tablespoons of butter. And I'm going to try and get a little bit of browning on it. Then I'm going to add 2 cups veg broth. Let it simmer for a while. And while it's simmering, we're going to get our onions cooking and get going on the rest of the soup. All right, so while that's browning, let's chop up our onion. Leeks are fine. A bunch of shallots is fine as well. All right, let's check on this. We got some good browning. Smells caramelized. Fantastic. Let's go ahead and add our 2 cups veg broth. And we're going to put that on the back burner and just let that simmer. And then we're going to strain it out. All right, let's chop these onions. About a 1/2 inch is fine, between 1/4 and 1/2 inch. We're going to be blending up this soup, so don't lose any fingers over this. All right, it's time for this soup. So let's head over to the stove. I'm going to add my remaining butter here. It's going to be about 3 tablespoons of butter. Just gonna heat that over medium-high heat. Let's add our onions and saute them. Go ahead and season this up. Oh, maybe a teaspoon of salt. Saute them until they're soft. This is going to give us a major flavor backbone to our butternut squash. I'm not adding garlic. I'm not adding a lot of big flavors here. I want the butternut squash to really shine. I was worried about the cornbread being too close to the heating element. It's not. So I'm just going to rotate it. I'm not going to lower it to the lower rack. All right, let's keep cooking this. As soon as your onions are sauteed, I'm gonna add 3 more cups of vegetable broth and let that simmer and kind of let those onions kind of dissolve into the broth. Then we're going to combine both the butternut squash broth and the onion broth, and that's going to be our soup base. All right, it's time. Let's go ahead and get 3 cups veg broth in here. We're just gonna simmer that for about 10 minutes, maybe 15. All right, cornbread is done. This was about 25 minutes. I pierced it with a fork, cake tester. Didn't come out with any batter. We're gonna let it cool for about 10 minutes. Then I'm gonna probably take a quarter of it, cut it up, and use it to make our cornbread croutons. All right, I have some melted butter here. There's about 4 tablespoons of melted butter. I'm gonna add about a teaspoon of pumpkin spice while it's hot to kind of bloom that. I'm gonna use that to toss my cornbread croutons on and then roast them, dry them out, get them nice and crunchy. All right, let's make sure it's all nice and loose. Let's pop it on out, ease on out. There we go. Oh, all right, so we got our nice little line right here. I'm just gonna cut this, let that cool. Cut these into rustic croutons, which is what you say when something's not neat. Rustic croutons here. Oh, it smells so good though. All right, let's let those cool a bit. So I just flipped my butternut squash. Again, you're gonna wanna roast it between 30 and 45 minutes, depending on your oven and the thickness of your squash and whatnot. So we still got a little bit more time. In that time, let's finish these croutons. So the cornbread cooled. I cut up a bunch of croutons. You cut them smaller if you want. I like big chunks, whatever you want. A normal crouton's probably 3/4 of an inch. These are closer to inch and a half, whatever you want. I have a pumpkin spice butter here. Teaspoon pumpkin spice and 4 tablespoons of butter. And I'm just gonna drizzle it on. 3 tablespoons. I'm gonna save the remaining for the soup. Toss that together, get it on your sheet pan. It's okay if they crumble up. And now just cook them until they're nice and toasted and dried out. And that's probably gonna be about 300 degrees for 5 to 10 minutes. So while those are going, let's finish this butternut squash soup. Here we go. All right, you got some decent browning. Would prefer it a little bit better browning, so maybe do a lower rack, get a little bit more browning. This is gonna be wicked hot. Do not burn yourself. We're gonna strain our butternut squash enhanced veg stock into our onion enhanced veg stock, pressing on those solids, get all the juice out, and take it away. All right, now we're just essentially gonna scrape out the inside here. You don't have to worry about cutting it up or whatnot. And we're just gonna put it into our pot. Okay. Oh yeah, here we go. All right, it's time to blend up the soup. All right, let's puree this up. Remember, it's hot. Start slow, keep the top pressed down. I'm gonna get it back in my pot so I can reheat it. I'm also gonna taste it for salt and sweetness. So if I need to add a little bit of sugar, I've got some brown sugar that I can add. We also are gonna be adding about 1/2 cup of heavy cream. So let's get pureeing. Starting slow and low. Let's get it going. Look at that color, it's nice. All right, here we go, nice and smooth. Here's the pour. Oh yeah. Perfect consistency here. All right. Now, if it was a little bit too thick, I can always add a little bit more veg broth. Let's taste it for salt and sweetness. That is so butternut squash forward. That's crazy. I'm gonna add about 1/2 teaspoon of salt. I'm also going to add about a half cup of heavy cream. It's going to give it a little creaminess, a little bit more rich fattiness. And last but not least, I am going to add a little bit of brown sugar. I'm probably going to put in about a teaspoon, maybe 1.5 teaspoons. That's it. But I just kind of want to bring out a little bit more of that natural sweetness. So now that that's all in there, let's get whisking. All right, I'm going to add another half teaspoon of salt. This thing needs a little bit more salt. I think we're perfect. Croutons are toasty. We got our pumpkin spice croutons over here. Let's go ahead, let's plate this up. Get some cornbread croutons here. They're nice and dried out. Bake them until they're done. I can smell that pumpkin spiciness. And last but not least, let's take a little bit of our pumpkin spice butter. We're gonna drizzle it around here. All right, let's go ahead and get all this together. We got crunchy crouton. Oh my God. Rich, buttery pumpkin spiciness, just right on the front end. You get that crunchy, corny crouton, and then that vegetal butternut squash soup. It is silky. It warms you from the inside out. I will say, do not skip that pumpkin spice butter. I want to put more on. It kind of just makes it. Get a little bit of this. Oops. Happy mistake. Oh my God. Rich butteriness. The corn comes through. This is like an all-purpose cornbread. Ramped it up with that cup of frozen corn that we pureed in. Buttermilk, the butter, the salt, the brown sugar. Levels of flavor, my friends. Levels of flavor. This is an internal fire on a cold day. What more do you want? What more do you want? It is so good. And the best part about this soup is the fact that it tastes like butternut squash. It doesn't taste like onions. It doesn't taste like nutmeg. It tastes like butternut squash. It tastes like fall. This is a cup of silky fall. Some cornbread, pumpkin pie spice, and butter. I need a moment. So that was butternut squash soup with pumpkin spice cornbread croutons and cornbread with butter on the side. Don't forget, you can check me out on YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram. If you want to support this channel, the best way to do it for free is just follow me on YouTube. If you want to contribute in other ways, I have a whole bunch of affiliate links down below each of my videos. If you go to that website and purchase anything through that link, I'll get a little kickback. But it's only good stuff, no junk, just the stuff I like and the stuff I use myself. Thanks so much for tuning in, and I hope to see you next time. Take care.